push on a foundation wall and it moves a little bit.
That's a problem.
I think once you get your head around underpinning the rest of the house, the problems of this room will likely no longer be your problems, and you'll save them for the next homeowner.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Editorial Director Andrew Zellner.
Morning, Patrick.
Operations Manager for TDS Custom Construction, Ian Schwant.
Morning, Patrick.
And our longtime producer, Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it's a pleasure to see you guys again. Thanks for being here.
Happy to be here as always.
Andrew, I want to jump into it. You had a blower door test. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so, as often happens, you put something out into the world, people reach out, and they're like, hey, I want to see how leaky your old house is. So our good friend Randy Williams from up in northern Minnesota had a trip to the Rockwool factory planned. And so he was flying out of Minneapolis, and he said, hey, I've got a few hours if you want to do a blower door test. And I said, absolutely. Way better than sitting in an airport. So
tell me, was the process what you expected? Have you seen one of these done before?
Yeah, it was pretty much what I expected, So I've got I've got a natural gas furnace and water heater and dryer, and so we shut all those off, and then.
It sounds like Ghostbusters moved into your house, dude.
I don't know if that's me.
I tried muting mine. My dogs are fighting in here.
Oh, that's
probably what you're hearing. But I thought I muted it on here.
Yeah.
Let me kennel them. They seem to be going at it this morning.
So Randy set this thing up. It looked like in your kitchen.
Yeah. So we've got a front door and a back door, and the front door is original. The back door is the one that I replaced and been working on air sealing. So we set it up at the back door, ran some tests, one of the things, so my back door swings outward, and he said one of the things that could happen is if the frame isn't attached to the door, or it's just held in by tension. If there's not enough tension, the frame could actually pop off the back door.
Because ordinarily the door is swinging in and it's pushing against the stop, but if you have an outswing door, it's on the wrong side of the stop, I think is what.
Yeah. So so we did our tests, and we did our first report. Came back at 32 air changes per hour, which surprised me quite a bit. He was like, that takes the cake for highest ACH I've done.
Yeah, and he's done warehouses.
Yeah. And so I was a little bit freaked out, and so then we left the blower door running and went around the house and found a few places. Basically, I've got one bedroom on the second floor where the old electrical service came in. There's a box for breakers and knob and tube wiring. I basically just have a couple of windows open in that room year round, based on how much leakage was going on there. The attic, again, was a big spot for leakage. And then sort of a couple spots in the basement. Basically, in an old house, you go around and you look for any cobwebs that are moving. And we did a little bit of smoke testing. The windows in the house were replaced in 2016, but a lot of the original window frames and sashes are still part of it too. So there's a little bit of leakage around the windows, but that 32 ACH in my mind really stuck with me. And then as we were getting ready to pack up, Randy said, wait a second, let's take one more of these rings off the blower, because I think, and so we did that, and it turned out that was an anomaly. And then we did a couple more tests, and the ACH averaged out at about 12.5 ACH. So it's still very high.
You're still the winner.
Yeah,
with
it's
regard
still
to
very high. But he totally softened me by throwing out that 32 number first.
You're like, 12's not so bad.
Yeah, 12 is fantastic compared to 32. Yeah, so it was very interesting. Um, I've got a couple of cat roommates right now, and they were very interested in the blower door test, so that was fun.
Were they standing there with their little faces?
Well, the where the blower doors is the exact size for a cat to sneak out and get outside. So yeah, so the plan now is I'll continue to work on my air sealing, work on some attic stuff, try to tighten up that back bedroom, and in another year, 18 months, we'll do another blower door test and see where we land.
Are you tempted to ask your utility for help with regard to energy improvements? Does your utility have that program?
So we've got somewhat of a program. Unfortunately, because I like to do a lot of the work myself, it still ends up being cheaper if I do the work myself. I can still get rebates on sort of like insulation purchases and those sorts of things. And I've been looking at some other electrification stuff. But the utilities, it's still a very natural gas heavy world in Minnesota. And
because it's freaking cold. You guys need lots of heat. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very cold, and I'm hoping to make my house just a little bit warmer this year.
And were there any red flag spots, accepting the old electrical panel space? Eaves, I'm guessing, was probably a big source of air leakage.
Yeah, so we've got basically a full second story, but it's a gambrel type house, and so there was some I think cellulose was blown into those like knee wall areas at some point, but there's there's still a bunch of airflow. The house is balloon framed, so there's still a lot. He was so we know there's a bunch of air leaking into this room, but it could be coming from the other side of the house because it's probably connected
right
through the framing.
Well, it sounds like you have your work cut out for you. Do you like this work, or is this something you're dreading?
Going up into the attic's always fun.
Right.
You never know what you're going to find.
Especially in the summertime.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So my plan is to hire somebody to remove all the insulation from the attic. We've got maybe 6 inches of various types blown in over the last 100 years, and then do all the air sealing myself and blow in a bunch more up there. But that will probably wait until the fall.
Well, please keep us posted on your energy performance improvements. How about you, Ian? What have you been doing?
So I also had a blower door test for my final.
Ian.
Yeah, it was a little disappointing. We came in at 0.98 after we were at 0.6 after we had it framed in, but one of the things that he had me do was leave the HRV ports open and then the venting of the dryer and stuff like that. So, and I did find where I think the electrician drilled another hole, or someone drilled another hole in the mechanical room by the panel. So I did find air leakage coming in at the rim, but all in all, pretty happy with it.
0.9 is pretty impressive, dude. You should be delighted.
Yeah, I want it better.
So are you going to make an effort to make it better? Or do you think there are places you could improve it now?
Not good enough.
Good enough.
The amount of energy we used to heat the house over winter was so low that's what I'm going to be happy about. My propane usage and my electric bill. That's the proof.
What about your screen porch? How's that coming?
Screen porch is done.
Good.
I stretched all the screen into the screenies stuff. Actually talked to that sales guy that contacted the podcast after I mentioned it, and they posted some pictures on their social media stuff. I just need to cut the overhang of the screen this weekend. I wasn't sure if the sun would do anything to the screen after it had been stretched that tight, but we got zero sun after I finished that project. So who knows, but now it's time to cut it back.
So you left the excess there so you could retension it if you needed to, I'm guessing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, first time I'd ever done it. I helped Andy Engel do it on a project in Pauling, New York once, but I wasn't there when the screen got stretched.
Well, I bet that's a nice space at the end of a work day to chill.
Yeah, except it's been 45 here in Wisconsin, as Andrew's probably experienced.
It's very much a chill atmosphere right now.
Yeah, we're back to early spring all of a sudden.
How about you, Jeff? You mentioned ahead of the show that you have been working on cars again. What's going on with that?
Replacing the exhaust system on the Explorer, so from the manifolds back. So it's fun.
So how'd you get the bolts off the manifolds for the Y pipe? That's got to be impossible.
It was interesting, just getting to the bolts more than anything. It's like 2 extensions and a swivel and.
But they came undone because they always looked impossibly rusted to me.
These weren't too bad. I actually got 3 of them off, no problem. And the 4th one actually took the stud out of the manifold. So I have to replace that.
Wow. Well, good for you. Is it almost done?
Yeah, I wound up having to order more parts because I was going to just stop at the first muffler, and now I need to go all the way back to the tailpipe. So.
Car repairs. I'm really sad I haven't had an opportunity to do that recently.
I thought of you this week, Patrick. My wife was gone for a week and a half for work, so I took her 2011 Subaru Forester to the Subaru mechanic just to get it looked over. And when he called me back, the first thing he said to me was, "So how long can I have the car?" New rear hubs, new exhaust, new front sway bars, some brake work, oil change, all that good stuff. So,
well, that's going to set you back a couple grand, is my guess.
Yeah, that might be her garden shed money gone, keeping her on the road.
I have nothing to report. I was in North Carolina in Boone with Andy Steele of FRS Builders photographing a cabinet installation feature for the Fine Homebuilding. And what was interesting about this piece is Andy has used flat pack cabinets on a number of projects and quite a bit of savings associated with that. A lot of labor in putting them together, hours and hours, but they seem great. They had plywood boxes. They went together pretty easy, and boy, you can't beat the price. I want to say it was like a third of built boxes, but it's obviously not a complete savings owing to the time you have to spend to put them together, and it, of course, takes a lot of space too. Have you used these, Ian, before?
I have. When I flipped houses with a former landlord from like 2009 to 2012, that was our standard kitchen. There was a place in, I think, Albany, New York that sold RTA cabinets direct to consumer, and my landlord would just go up there and just be like, "Throw a kitchen on the back of my truck, whatever it is, I don't care."
And that's one of the cool things about this is you can go get them, and they're in stock generally. Yeah,
he would just go up there with a crude drawing of the corner of the room where we were putting them, and the guy at the yard would just go, "All right, yeah, this is close for you." And I do remember him taking a long time to put together, but we would always have 2 or 3 of us doing it, and it went pretty quick. But yeah, like you said, it's a quarter of the cost. My in-laws put those in their house too, and my father-in-law was more or less happy with them.
I was surprised at the quality. They seem like middle-of-the-road cabinets, very much so. They were. The finish is amazing. It's obviously done by a robot because no human could spray it as smooth as this machine did.
Did you find that they had a lot of off-gassing? Most of the ones I've done, really, when you open up the boxes, it kind of takes your breath away a little bit.
I didn't notice that. The house was wide open owing to the temperature. So the front door was propped open and the back door was similarly. So I didn't notice that. It might be a problem, might not. I'm not sure. One thing we did notice in this house was the gas fireplace was stinking like gas. The pilot light, I don't know if it was out or just, the thing was unvented because you could tell it didn't have a flue in the top of the firebox. So I would tell folks to steer clear of those things because even in the summertime with the house completely open, I could smell it, and I don't think that's good for you.
Or shut them off in the summer. if you really have to have that as a cheap, ready heat source.
I think in the right conditions, they probably do use this for supplemental heating because, most of the time it's a heat pump, but it does get cold there.
I know areas where they're prone to long power outages. People will have those in small areas because they don't require any electric, and you can heat up a pretty decent sized space with one of those.
I'm curious if we'll ever see those vent-free, ventless appliances go away in our country. I'm curious. Well, as always, we heard from some listeners about a number of subjects, and I sure appreciate it. This comes from Keith Bowling, who we've interviewed a couple times on Pro Talk. He says, Patrick, in episode 459, I'm glad that you read the letter from Steve in New Jersey about his moldy attic ladder after his energy upgrade from a state efficiency program. Contractors performing energy efficiency upgrades must be aware of the possible unintended consequence of the work they perform. In a heating climate like New Jersey, a cold roof and attic dictate that the air and vapor control layers be as close to the warm side of the ceiling assembly as possible. For Steve and anyone else who has work done through a utility or state energy office program, there is an escalation path when issues arise. Most, if not all, program administrators use some sort of quality assurance and/or field technical support. It's usually possible to contact the program manager, explain what happened, and request a follow-up evaluation or inspection. If poor quality work is observed, the original contractor or a replacement contractor will usually remediate it. Additionally, the observations from a follow-up evaluation or inspection are usually fed into a feedback loop to the original contractor. If the program administrators see recurring issues, they are likely to adjust training, contractor support, and/or procedures to head off future problems. I'd encourage anyone who has an issue with a program installation to reach out to the original contractor first, and if the issue isn't resolved, contact the program management. Well, that's helpful, right? There is an appeal. Are you going to appeal your blower door results, Andrew? Are you dissatisfied?
I'm wholly satisfied, but it is sort of like, Randy and I were talking about, these are some things you could do, but it's also like you do one thing, it may change something else. We're likely we'll never get lower than, 8 or 6 air changes per hour, but he's, thinking through the process thoroughly and completely and multiple times before you actually start sealing things is super important because it's never one size fits all.
I guess the great risk in the attic ladder is a good demonstration is that all of a sudden you have condensation in places you didn't before. And if it's in a place you don't see it, it could do a lot of damage before, it was discovered. Well, Keith, thank you for that insight. This comes from our friend Barbara in Georgia.
Is this the Barbara?
This is the Barbara, yes.
The Barbara, okay. Making sure.
Hello, podcast friends. I just finished listening to the podcast with questions about termites and insulating under a raised floor. You wanted to hear more about termites? I got you. I had a termite swarm emerge in my tiny house last year. I made a video about how I dealt with it. It goes into termite habits and exactly how they made their way into the edible parts of my house. I got macro shots of them and everything. Did you watch Barbara's video that I put the link in the script? No, you didn't. So it shows termites crawling all over her window and blowing around our house, and I would have burned the place down, but we'll get more on that in a little bit here. She says, termites can't eat Advantech. I kind of assumed zip sheathing would be equally impervious. It's not that is that not the case? I do remember being surprised by the YouTube videos of Matt Reisinger spraying a blue borate solution halfway up the inside of his walls before he put in the rock wool or whatever he used in that insane ice chest of a house he built. After I took care of the termites, I worked my very low R-value insulation under my house. I built my house the perfect height above the ground for working underneath it fairly comfortably as a full-grown adult. No toddlers on my crew. I could write an article for you about termites, but I'm not sure my experience is very relevant to normal people. I've done a lot of research. It seems the poison and detection side of it is mostly about protecting the investment of whoever holds the mortgage. If you own your own house outright, the pest control people don't even try and sell you a termite treatment contract. I thought about you, Patrick, when I was under the house yanking down insulation with termites raining down on my hat. Your worst nightmare, I'm sure. There were also some top-notch spiders under there, too. Oh, my God, Barbara. Thank you. No. Yeah, so termites, no thanks. One of the few good reasons to live in a cold place, right?
Absolutely.
That's right.
Do you have them in Wisconsin, Ian?
I've never heard of them.
Yeah.
Here, carpenter ants, yes, but never heard of termites here. It doesn't mean we don't have them.
And we also heard from Nathan on the same subject. Hi, all. Listen to this week's podcast, episode 461, and it was mentioned that the amount of wood in a typical house was not enough to support the building of a nest for a whole colony. I'm writing from the Kansas City area where termites have always been a problem. I've been helping a friend that bought this house 3 weeks ago, and it was noted by the inspector that there was some termite damage in the finished basement. The basement is a walkout with the whole back of the house stick-built off the footing and above grade level. It was much more than some termite damage, but the reason I'm writing is to send these pictures of what was an entire condo development worth of a nest. The largest part was under the lower platform of the built-in bar, and at least half of it fell apart when I pulled the platform from the floor. Even the veteran exterminator was amazed by its size and scope. A treatment was performed before closing around the perimeter. A treatment was performed before close around the perimeter of the house. Now that there is access to the framing and the concrete slab, the exterminator has used a spray foam on the worst areas and drilled through the slab to treat under it as well. Love the show. Keep up the good work. Nathan, did you guys see these amazing termite housing?
It's incredible. And like, so I feel like I hear about termites in Texas and I'm like, that's fine. That's a long ways away. But like, I can drive to Kansas City in a day, no problem, you know? And it's crazy how intricate and, you know, expansive they can become gone unchecked.
So shortly after my parents bought their house, they had a termite infestation, and it turned out that the house originally had a dirt basement, on the floor, and there was like the basement steps were like just right on the dirt, and there was like a little wall next to the steps that was built into the dirt too. And subsequently, someone poured a concrete slab around all of this stuff, and of course, my mom and dad, who were in their 20s, like lost their mind and had to remortgage the house to have it treated. But something has to ordinarily be going on in cooler places for them to get established, and ground contact is definitely one of the things that's going on.
So you're not supposed to bury wood and dirt inside your home?
Nope.
Oh, okay. All right. Fair enough.
And I've heard of like stumps getting buried that'll do the same thing. So be careful with that stuff, folk. This comes from Andrew in Annapolis, Maryland. Greetings, podcast team. Long-time listener, first-time writer here. I'm responding to the listener Adam debating replacing his furnace with a heat pump in episode 459. As an employee of one of the major HVAC manufacturers, I feel there are two major points missing here from this and other discussions of its type. First, the BTU ratings on HVAC equipment are a measurement of energy over time. His current furnace consumes 100,000 BTUs of gas per hour and converts it to heat. To a certain degree, slight downsizing would only result in longer runtime. The system would still maintain the same temperature indoors. Increased runtime actually improves the comfort as it reduces humidity in the summer and maintains more even heat in the winter. Second, the vast majority of residential HVAC systems in the U.S. are oversized to begin with, especially in older homes like this when they were first built and or converted from coal or oil. Contractors used to stand across the street and see how many fingers would cover the house. 2 fingers, 2 tons. 3 fingers, 3 tons. Fast forward several decades, and each contractor just replacing what was there with identical capacity is what happens most often. Meanwhile, the home's efficiency has been increasing, and so is the equipment. And even before his insulating project, this listener system is probably oversized. My advice would be to partner with a local HVAC company willing to do the manual J, manual D, and other calculations needed to properly size his system before and after his weatherization projects. This sounds like the perfect opportunity for a dual fuel system using a high efficiency 2-stage gas furnace inside coupled with a variable capacity heat pump outside. This would use the heat pump efficiency for the bulk of his heating needs and would still use the gas furnace for backup and during extremely low outside temperatures, instead of electrical resistance heat strips. It also takes into account the eventual reduction in heating and cooling loads due to impending insulation and air sealing improvements. The indoor coil is the same. The only increase in cost would be the outdoor unit being a heat pump over a traditional AC condenser, a matter of a few $1,000s max. All the major manufacturers now have variable capacity split heat pumps, which no longer require expensive proprietary communicating controls. Love the podcast. Keep it up. Thanks, Andrew, Annapolis, Maryland. Well, thanks, Andrew. I never thought about that, right? You can just downsize and let the thing run longer, right? I think it would keep up and all, but the very coldest temperatures, right? I want to see how long before you guys would say something about this.
So
You
this
said
has
it
been
all. I
something.
think you were right.
Yeah, I've been thinking a lot about my heat, and like I've got this giant gravity furnace next to me, and what will we do to replace it? And like the deeper you dig in, the more you learn, and the more you like realize that oversizing is like definitely a thing, and it's just like people are afraid to right size because being cold sucks.
Yeah, agreed. And hot too, right?
Yeah.
I think people have an expectation, especially with air conditioning, that you turn on the thermostat and it's immediately cool in the house and comfortable. But that's not how it works. You have to cool off all the things in the house too, instead of just making cool air. Mm-hmm. So Ian, you had an interesting experience helping your colleague with her house, which has been uncomfortably hot. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So Jackie is our client and marketing coordinator at TDS. She has a dormerless cape, which I think is ripe for a giant greedy dormer on one side of it. But she has an attic bedroom, and that's the main bedroom that they sleep in, and it gets really uncomfortably hot up there, and they just replaced their furnace to one of those dual fuel ones that you were just talking about, and they want to put air conditioning into the space, but they're concerned about getting the load right. So I went over there and checked out the crawl spaces around, and I did a little SketchUp that I sent you guys just to show how the insulation is not in the rafters of this dormerless cape. It's on the floor deck and then goes up the walls and then folds over the lid of this attic bedroom space.
We should tell folks that this is kind of a cape arrangement with a knee wall and a little crawl space behind it.
Yeah. So anywhere where the crawl spaces were turned into closets, those are insulated around them. Like their bedroom closet is this short behind the knee wall and staircase closet. One of the things that really struck me when I crawled behind the knee walls, then the day I was there was maybe 60s, something like that, temperature wise outside, and not very sunny. It was pretty temperate behind the walls. It wasn't that out of the ordinary, but in that little triangle space above the flat ceiling of the room, it was unbelievably hot up there. So I'm wondering if, because there's no real venting for that space, there's a ridge vent that was put in when the roof was redone, but it doesn't extend down to the soffits, which aren't that deep anyway. And there's no venting in the gable ends of the house, that I wonder if the air is actually able to ever escape from that little triangle above the 7'6" ceiling height in the room. And then they also have a chimney that was knocked off below the roof line, but still extends through the room and into this little triangle of space above the ceiling that she plans on knocking out and using that space for bringing some ductwork up to that floor for air conditioning. So my thought was to put in some field vents in the actual roof to try and get some kind of convection going in that little triangle space, to try and get some of that cold air out of there, or possibly a gable end vent to do the same thing, and then adding cellulose insulation above the flat ceiling of the bedroom, just as two kind of low tech, low investment ways to see if it improved their situation. But I wanted to see if anybody else had any other ideas.
Well, I think research would indicate that roof venting doesn't really do much to lower attic temperatures, but every situation is different. Definitely the thermal bridging. So you mentioned that it has like R19 bats in the flat ceiling and probably in the rafters too. But you're going to get a ton of thermal bridging, owing to the fact the bat is in between the framing members and not covering them, right? So.
Right. That was why I was thinking that she should get rent the blower and get some cellulose insulation and just blow it full. But I was wondering if the venting was also any kind of an issue. But you do make a good point, Patrick, that it's hard to correctly vent a space like that.
Do you have thoughts, Andrew?
What Ian had said about, insulating it, I think it's like, it's an experiment, right? You've got your hypothesis, you want to do just one thing, see if it makes a difference. And so I would start with the insulation.
An air sealing, right?
Yeah.
Is this space big?
Everyone should be air sealing all the time. If you live in any sort of old house, just carry a can of spray foam with you.
Yeah, the air sealing is really limited to getting rid of that chimney penetration, and then that's about it. Yeah, it's a drywalled room, and she would like to gut it, but her partner's not. He's not quite on board yet with the full gut of the one bedroom in the house.
Right. I got to think that masonry chimney is a huge radiator too, right? If it's up in that hot attic space, it's going to be taking on heat and then radiating it, lower down into the roof, into the room rather. I think if you could get that thing out of there, that would help a lot.
Yeah, and that is in the plan, and that chimney is in kind of the middle of the room, and then there's a scuttle on the opposite end. So I think between those two spaces, because you can't really crawl up there. The tall point of the triangle is less than the length of my forearm, so it's a tough space to get into, even if the chimney was gone and you had a large opening. But I think you could do a pretty good job blowing it full of cellulose. Sort
of unrelated, is there a good way to approach removing a chimney from the center of your house? Are you do you just take the bricks and throw them down the center until they get to the first floor and remove them? Has anyone seen it done well? Yeah, so my mother-in-law and I removed the chimney from our old house in New York. It just happened that they were there for a couple of weeks, and I was like, let's knock the chimney down. So she and I did it, and all we did was just kind of chunk by chunk, and that was from the roof through the second floor space and then all the way down into the basement, and just bucket by bucket was how we took it out. They tend to start coming apart pretty easy once you
they come apart with your bare hands. They just I don't know what keeps them standing, honestly. It's surprising how flimsy they are, old masonry.
Yeah, for me the chimney work it's a site protection job. It's making sure that you're protecting your floor and clearing the space so that you have an open area to work, and set chunks of brick down if you happen to get 10 brick that want to come off together, that you have somewhere to go with them.
I've tried the tossing the bricks into the lower parts of the chimney before. One of our specs for habitat rehabs in Pittsburgh was to remove masonry chimneys because the furnace and the water heater were direct vent owing to combustion safety, and flashing a masonry chimney is difficult and it requires ongoing maintenance. So we would just, as a matter of course, take them down below the roof sheathing or lower. And inevitably, if you try and toss the bricks into the center of it, they get plugged up, and there's no room. I don't know what happens, but.
Well, if your mother-in-law is free, I'm planning to do that project in the next year after I get rid of my gravity furnace.
Yeah, I'll see if Gloria's got any trips to Minnesota planned.
You're gonna need like a dozen 5-gallon buckets, Andrew.
Yeah. I've still got a dozen 5-gallon buckets from my basement excavation work. So
this is almost the same thing. It's just the other end of the house.
Okay.
I wish I was there the day that the dumpster company came and got that dumpster full of the bricks from the chimney, because that was not what I told them I would be putting in it. So I'm sure the guy was like, wow, this is way heavier than just cleaning out upstairs of a house.
I think that, with the popularity of Facebook Marketplace, you could get some sucker to take those from you if you could pile them up outside, right? Well, I hope we'll hear from other folks about, was her name Gloria, Ian?
Yeah, that's my mother-in-law, the chimney tear down person. Yeah. But Jackie's the one with the dormerless cape with the one room in the attic. And I think overall it's a really good use of space. She claimed that it's really hard to sleep up there in the summertime because of the heat that comes through. But I think you make a good point about the chimney acting as a heat source. Yeah. when you don't need it to be.
Well, hopefully other folks will write in with some thoughts about how to deal with this. I'm assuming it is a common problem with attic living space.
It's a very common style of house all over the Great Lakes and Northeast, and
it's a cute little place. Yeah. This comes from Nate. Hi, FHB podcast crew. Love the show. Thanks for the quality content. My question is in the same vein as some you've tackled recently, i.e. replacing a furnace/boiler with a heat pump, but I can't recall any discussion of the following. With perfectly good hydronic baseboards all over the house, it seems like a waste to use a mini-split or ducted systems when upgraded into a heat pump. Does anyone ever install a heat pump and use it as a heat storage tank of water that is circulated through existing baseboards? I know there's a preference for hydronic versus forced air, can be kind of a personal choice, but I kind of like the heat the baseboard radiators give us. So is this simply not done for some reason? My bet is that the electricity needed to run the circulator makes this a bad approach. Is that the case? Perhaps one can't get the water hot enough for radiation with a heat pump. Also, if you chilled the water in the winter and ran it through the rads, do you think you'd get any meaningful cooling? As I'm sure you've guessed, this question is inspired by my 90s oil-burning furnace, the slightly sketchy tank feeding it, and my desire to move away from fossil fuels if I can. Thanks for the show, Nate. All right, Nate, so can you make cool and hot water to use with your existing baseboards with a heat pump? Anyone dig into this?
I dug into it a little bit, and my digging didn't really go anywhere as far as using a heat pump. I do know that he really wouldn't be able to use those baseboards to cool the house, at least cool it in a meaningful way. I don't think there's enough line length of cold water to go through. I could be wrong there, but just doesn't seem like it would do the trick.
I've been exploring this a little bit because
your house, yeah.
I'm planning to replace my gravity furnace. I've got access under my first floor to install, radiant tubing, no existing ductwork, and the consensus I've found is that heat pump boilers do exist. There's a company in Minnesota that's a space pack distributor and contractor. They make the what is it? The
High velocity air
high
conditioning.
velocity air conditioning. But they also carry a line of heat pump to hydronic heating systems, and generally you can't get the water as hot as you would that you'd need for like a cast iron radiator. But that the like sweet spot for wall mounted radiators and for in-floor heating is actually lower than like the 180 degree Fahrenheit max a boiler does. So using a unit that doesn't need to get as hot is definitely like a thing people do. But you likely wouldn't be able to use your existing baseboard radiators. You'd need to sort of re-engineer the size of the pipe and how much you need to still heat your house with a lower water temperature.
The other option would be to go to a full electric boiler. I think there's a couple companies in Minneapolis or Minnesota that make those type of Euro style electric boilers. I do know that they take a big chunk out of your panel to run one of those. Yeah.
You do have to go back to
half of your
candlelight for some
half
of
of your 200 amp service might go to running that thing.
But this is like a thing they're doing in Europe all the time. Like you'll see it pop up in the news of, they'll do whole housing developments, and there are units you can swap almost one for one with a traditional boiler, but they do require some re-engineering.
There's a company, and forgive me, folks, if I get it wrong, Brute Force Collaborative, which is a main engineering firm, I want to say. And they do this with radiant panels sometimes, I know. Often in the ceiling, because it's way less risky to put the panels in the ceiling so no one doesn't put a picture hook through it. But it's going to take some engineering. And I know Daikin makes a lineup of heat pumps for this application, but this stuff is complicated. You might be able to do it, but boy, if something goes wrong, getting someone to fix it or make it work better is going to be a challenge. So I don't know if I would want to do that. What do you think about this, Jeff?
I really don't have any experience in it. I mean, certainly cooling is not a viable option because there's a lot of condensation in all that copper tubing.
Yeah, very good point.
I think, Andrew, you made a good point about needing to re-engineer that existing system because of the different size tubing you would need to run that lower temperature water as opposed to the near boiling temperatures that you'd be running through a big cast iron radiator.
I hope Nate will keep us posted on what he's doing, because I think increasingly this is going to be something folks are, either want to do for their own reasons, or we're going to have to deal with carbon and climate change.
We're slowly turning into the fine furnace replacement podcast from the fine insulating and air sealing. We're evolving.
Once again, if you folks out there have thoughts on this, I'd love to hear it. It's not something we're familiar with, so we're kind of shooting from the hip. But it seems like, Andrew, you did the best of us in researching this, so thank you for that. Next question comes from Wade K. Hey, FHB crew. Writing in to pick your brain on a building detail I've never come across before. I'm building a 2-story, 30 by 50 garage with living space above. It will have 2x6 walls, and I'm thinking 2 to 3 inches of spray foam, and then fill the rest with bat insulation on the inside. So I think we call this flash and bat. You put a layer of spray foam for air sealing, and then you put less expensive fluffy insulation in there because spray foam is so costly. He says the outside cladding will be horizontal 8-inch LP siding. My question is concerning the sheathing. I have a contractor friend who will be helping me with the build and happens to have a rather large stock of a combination of OSB and plywood sheathing that has an FRP panel, fiberglass reinforced panel, glued to it. I'm thinking of using those for the exterior walls as well as the interior walls of the shop portion. Having never seen this detail before, could one tape all seams with flashing tape, I'm thinking zip tape, would that suffice as a WRB, or would adding house wrap also be required? What issues do you see that I may be missing? I'm in South Dakota, climate zone 6, and I'm concerned about condensation forming between the panels and the siding. The shop portion does have in-floor heat and a 5-inch insulated slab. Any questions? Please reach out. Thanks for your help. Wade K. So do you guys think that Wade wants to use this for sheathing, or this is like paneling, an interior finish? What do you think is going on here?
I think he wants to use this like you would use zip.
Yeah. I think he actually wants to do both because his buddy's got a bunch of it. But the sheathing part is, I think, the most interesting.
Of the question, yeah. I've installed acres of this product in hospitals and in schools. And the one thing I would say to Wade is this stuff is not mounted to structurally rated sheet goods. So
oh, really? So these are not like APA panels? No. Interesting.
Okay. No, so it's highly unlikely this is mounted to structurally rated panels that you could use to sheathe a building. It's really meant to be like a impact resistant interior panel. We would typically put these in like the lower 4 feet of a hospital hallway or in a school hallway, so that if you bang into it with things, it wouldn't damage the wall. I think using it on the inside is a good idea. I would also be concerned about the glue that it's mounted to the sheet stock with, being able to take the temperature differential that the Dakotas would have throughout the course of the year if you're going to put that behind some type of siding and then rely on it as your WRB. That's kind of where I come down on it. Free is usually expensive in a case like this.
But it sounds like a fantastic material for a garage.
Yeah, on the inside. Yeah. I think it's a great idea to do the inside of a shop with it, but I would be pretty wary about it being an exterior grade product for sheathing use.
There are other ways to strengthen a building to resist racking. That you could use this, but you would definitely have to plan on that and not figure it out as you're going along.
Right, and then I don't know if you could rely on just taping the seams as a longer term WRB. I would suspect it would work well in the short term, but as you go through a couple of hot summer to bitter cold winter cycles that you would have in South Dakota, I don't know that it would hold up long term. Plus the stuff is really not fun to nail through or fasten through, as far as fastening siding to it would be concerned.
So you're thinking that his plan is to put the FRP to the outside and use that as the WRB? Wow, that's
the
crazy.
way I read the question. Yeah, when he says, would that suffice as a WRB, and could you tape all the seams with flashing tape, thinking zip. If it wasn't going to be 2 stories and have living space, I would kind of say throw caution to the wind. It's just a garage, but once you're adding some living space in the second story, that changes your structural needs of the building. And then you're also going to have, presumably, some kind of conditioned space inside of it that would be conditioned year-round.
And we have to remember that South Dakota gets tornadoes, right? And high winds, in the Great Plains. It can be really windy.
That's a great point. Another reason I'd be surprised if you could sneak it past an inspector, unless you were going to go to the extent that the code would make you go to achieve that structural rating without structural panels.
Some other bracing method, yeah.
Yeah.
Jeff, what do you think about this?
Well, I mean, certainly Ian's got a lot more knowledge and experience than I do. Yeah, because I'm not familiar with the product at all, but yeah, it does sound like he wants to use it as if it were zip, and I don't know that, it's an off-label use.
Right. Well, Wade, I would definitely dig into, does this have a stamp on it as a rated panel, and go from there. If it doesn't, you're going to have to think long and hard about whether you want to go to the trouble to make this work in this application. But I would definitely use it on the inside. Why not? It's perfect, right?
Yeah, usually the companies that make this product will make a bunch of different style trim pieces that you can use for blind fastening at the edges and kind of have a nice seam from panel to panel. And you can do some pretty decent looking finish work as far as institutional finish work is concerned to make these panels look pretty nice. I think it would be a great idea for a shop.
Especially owing to its impact resistance, right? You don't have to worry about your jack handle smacking the drywall and breaking it.
Yeah, and it's easy to clean too. That's the other thing, is it tends to have kind of a glossy, bumpy surface on it, sort of like a basketball or football would have, like a dimpled surface, and that makes it pretty easy to clean.
If folks out there listening aren't familiar with this product, you will see it like in gas station bathrooms. You will see it in like butchers' shops, in the grocery store, for the reasons we just mentioned, is it's easy to clean and tough.
Yeah, anytime you see kind of a glossy, shiny surface in a store or a doctor's office or hospital or, some kind of institutional place, that's what you're looking at.
Well, keep us posted, Wade. I'm curious about your garage. It sounds like a fantastic space. Our next question comes from James. Hey, podcast crew. I recall Andrew mentioning that he has a room underneath a porch at his house, and I'd love to learn more about it because I'm trying to figure out what to do with the front porch of our house when we remodel the basement. Our lot has a 13% grade, and we're hoping to underpin the foundation so that the new basement floor will be level with the highest point in our driveway, giving us more basement ceiling height and allow us to add a grade level entrance on the driveway. As we're working out our plans, I've been puzzling over what we should do with the area underneath the front porch. The front porch has quite a few idiosyncratic elements that I suspect might be common from homes of its era, which is 1912. Okay. For starters, it's entirely covered by a finished attic space. The central beam of the house extends to the front of the porch and is supported by the concrete steps. The side rim joists extend past the front foundation wall to the front porch. The joists of the porch run parallel to the house and rest upon the central beam. There is no ledger board. Instead, the tails of the subfloor extend beyond the front wall and the porch floorboards rest on it. Effectively, the porch is an extension of the house's floor system that happens to be outdoors. The floor system is in the overhanging attic is similar. It seems like we all have all the structural elements for the porch to be part of the house. All that's missing is the walls. The front foundation wall seems to be a lost cause because it looks like a foundation, but it's mostly freestanding. It provides support for the central beam, but sits 2 inches behind the rim joist. It's built out of CMUs and flexes when you push on it. Since I doubt the wall would ever survive underpinning, the question I'm left with is, does it make sense to include the area underneath the porch inside the building envelope? If we did that, what would the detailed piece for the roof look like? Could we put a low sloped roof below the beam? I'd love to hear more about how Andrew is built, since just about everything he said about his house sounds like mine. And I'm curious to see if whoever built that room might have done the same problem solving around similar conditions. I've attached some photos. Feel free to share them on the podcast if you'd like. Thanks, James. All right, Andrew, does this sound like your porch, underporch room?
Very much like my porch room, which is just behind this wall. So yeah, it's very similar. So we've got a gambrel style house. The front porch is kind of like the front right hand pocket of it. It's maybe 8x8. It's on foundation wall, but the foundation wall also follows the line of the insulated house too. So like there's foundation wall block behind me, and it was probably just cold storage at one point. And then there is a room above it, so the roof of the porch is the like floor of our front bedroom.
Is that bedroom cold? I bet it is, because the floor is outdoors.
It is cold, but we'd like that for a bedroom. There's also actually a hump in the floor that corresponds with where the wall, one of the side walls of the porch is. And so I'm excited to pull up that carpet and take a look at that subfloor and see what's going on. Actually, when Randy was here, he had a couple of big levels in his truck, and he's just like, out of curiosity, let's just like see. And everything seemed fairly level and plumb. But also the floor system of the porch though is a separate entity from the rest of the house. So it's hung on a ledger at the front door and extends over the foundation, is supported there. And it's going to take a ton of work to air seal and insulate it and make it into habitable space. Way less work than putting a very nice ceiling door on it from the basement. So I think I'll use it as cold storage in the future. That's also where my sump pit is for my sump pump. So, yeah.
I mean, I think you have to separate these two spaces. I don't think it makes sense to bring this basement room into the conditioned space. Like you said, put a door on it. Make sure you air seal between the indoors and outdoors. And, if the rafters are connecting the spaces and the floor joists, this all gets harder because now you're thermal bridging, right, into the living space. I don't think there's a good way to deal with this, honestly.
And it's basically the amount of space I would get is like the equivalent of building a small shed in my backyard. And that would be way easier to do.
I'm
Anyone else?
fascinated with the existence of spaces like this. The farmhouse I grew up in had a couple of these little spaces under porches, and I used to love crawling into them as a kid and seeing what was going on back there, and not taking my parents' warnings, for there's nothing back there. There's no reason to go in there. And I'm like, no, I got to get a flashlight and see what's going on. One of them we actually used for firewood storage. It had a little door to the outside, and we would throw firewood into it for the wood burning furnace in the basement. But I remember the room above that, which I think was part of a bathroom, was just always freezing cold, no matter what.
I have toyed with the idea of putting in some sort of large opening door in the floor so I could get big stuff into the basement a lot more easily than down the stairs. But that's about the extent of I've thought about remodeling that room, other than some rudimentary air sealing.
I think it'd be a great room to turn into a soundproof room for a giant dust collector.
And it's leaky enough you wouldn't need makeup air, right?
Right. Yeah.
I think these spaces were oftentimes, we call them coal cellars in Pittsburgh, where, that was the storage for the coals, the coal furnace, right? It was that's where the coal went. And they often had a cast iron door to connect it to the outside, and then they would shovel the coal in there and then get it from inside the house to put it right in the furnace.
That's probably what our space was that we used for firewood, was for coal at one point in time.
I would also hazard that, I do like the push test in old houses. If you can push on a foundation wall and it moves a little bit,
that's a problem.
I think once you get your head around underpinning the rest of the house, the problems of this room will likely no longer be your problems, and you'll save them for the next homeowner.
You're thinking once he underpins and lowers the rest of this, that they're just going to be worn out and not bother. Okay.
Yeah.
That might be the best answer yet. Thoughts, Jeff?
Don't bother's always a great answer. Leave it for the next homeowner.
I want to say James is in a really temperate climate, too. I don't remember, but I thought it was California. What do you think, Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't sound like it makes any sense to try and bring that inside at all.
So how do you keep it separated from the indoor space? Insulate the wall that separates them?
Yeah, insulate the wall, the floor, the door.
The ceiling, right? You're gonna have to,
I think you'd have to treat it like some of the listeners that we've had recently send us stuff about screen porches and decks and 3-season rooms and how you insulate the floor system of that. But just thinking about it in terms of having to isolate that main floor from that basement space, and then also, as Andrew said, that space from the rest of your basement.
One thing I have been doing a little bit more research on is how to, so like there's a big overhang over the porch, but like during, windy rain and, if there's a bunch of snow on it that starts to melt, I do get a little bit of like water seeping in. And if I want to use it for any sort of storage, I don't necessarily want that stuff getting wet. So I've been puzzling a little bit over how to, weatherize it a bit more.
Yeah, James suggested like building a, roof inside of this space to deal with the, water that gets between the porch boards. Yeah. I don't know if that's helpful at all, James. Thanks.
But I'm happy to share some photos, James, too. I can snap some.
I think James has got to get a blower door to compare it to Andrew's blower door, since James feels that they're sister homes. See the condition that James is working in.
I think he's going to find out that this is not the low-hanging fruit in his energy improvement strategy. You guys have anything you want to talk about before we go? Once? Wait, twice?
Right. The only thing that I would say is I just finished an article about the hiring process that we've recently gone through at TDS that I sent off to Lana for editing. So hopefully that'll be on the website by the time this podcast airs. But it's been interesting to get out there and talk to a lot of different people for many different positions that we're looking for at TDS, ranging through the design department and then into the production, and looking for people who are experienced carpenters or recent grads of tech school programs. It's been interesting to be back involved in that space for me, doing more of the production related stuff than the estimating behind the scenes.
I'm guessing you, like everybody else, have trouble attracting people with so much demand. Is that true?
This is going to come off kind of conceited probably, but no, we've actually been able to attract a lot of really good applicants, and it's partially that the business has been around for 35 years, so it's a recognizable name, and then past people in the company that have done a lot of good work with developing relationships with not just vendors and lumber yards and other contractors, but also the local tech schools and even other contractors who look at us as not just a competitor, but somebody who is producing the same quality of work that they are. So it's that reputation building. But part of this article that I wrote for the website is talking a lot about my desire to put together a career path for people who work within residential construction. Commercial construction, because of its unionized background, has a pretty good career path where you can start off and work your way up into management roles like I did, but residential really is missing a set path like that, and companies that have a plan to move their employees from entry-level hammer swinger laborer on up through to project leads and eventually project managers in an office setting. So
I've learned recently you really have to spell that out for folks, or the temptation is for them to go elsewhere. But if they have an expectation that they're going to climb the ladder, they're more likely to stick with you, as I understand it.
Yeah, we started to kind of throw the question around of, well, why would someone want to work for us? And kind of approaching it from that introspective level, and just in talking to our field staff and staffs at other companies in my Remodelers Advantage group, the constant refrain from employees is, they want to know what the career path is at the company, where the company's going, how they fit in that. Many people now that are in their 20s and starting off, or even in their 30s changing careers, they want to know that the wage is there for them at some point, so that they can do things like have children, buy homes, all that American dream kind of stuff. But I think the further, certainly I get away from that time period in my life, I kind of forget how lucky I am to have made the career that I made, and looking back on it and seeing that I wouldn't have done that without an awful lot of people helping me along the way.
That's good stuff. Can't wait to see that. Anyone else?
Yeah, so if you enjoy me on this podcast, you'll also enjoy me on the Keep Craft Alive podcast. I'm taking that over from Rob, so plans to record my first one next week, and we'll see him at a little bit more frequent clip too. So similar, to Ian's discussion about hiring, really hoping to focus on not only good craftsmanship, but how to build a sustainable career in the trades.
Good stuff. Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Andrew, Ian, and Jeff for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Happy building. Thanks very much for listening.